The story begins on a remote and distant planet, far away from the busy and crowded parts of the galaxy. This planet was small, rocky, and harsh in many ways, but it had pockets of beauty and life. Rivers snaked through valleys, forests grew in sheltered areas, and occasional mountains reached toward the sky. It was a place where survival was not easy, and every day was a struggle. But it had a quiet charm that made the settlers who lived there feel a sense of belonging. This world was not a rich or famous world. It was not home to powerful empires or bustling trade hubs. It was a colony world, a place where humans had come seeking a new beginning, hoping to build a life away from crowded cities and political conflicts. Back on Earth and other settled planets, the people who lived here were a small, tight-knit community. They came from different backgrounds, but all shared one thing: the courage to leave everything they knew and settle on a world that was mostly unknown. The colony had been established some years earlier, and in that time, its inhabitants had worked tirelessly to make it livable. Simple homes were built from materials that could be found nearby, and small farms and gardens supplied food. They had learned to adapt to the planet's challenges: the harsh weather, occasional violent storms, and strange wildlife. Life was not easy, but it was honest, and there was a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. Every day, people would wake up before the sun, tending to their duties, repairing homes, or checking the small hydroponic farms they had built. Children played in the open fields, unaware of the vast dangers of the universe outside their little world. The older generation taught them survival skills and the importance of community, and everyone felt connected by the shared mission of keeping the colony alive and growing despite their relative isolation. The colonists were not completely cut off from the larger galaxy. They had built a modest communication system, capable of sending and receiving signals, but it was limited. Messages to nearby colonies or supply stations were rare and slow. They also had a basic SOS beacon, a small but powerful device designed for emergencies. This beacon was their lifeline in case disaster struck if the colony faced danger that they could not handle on their own. The SOS could call for help. Everyone knew about it, and it had been tested a few times in minor emergencies. But nothing truly catastrophic had ever happened until the day that changed everything. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, far from the colony, there lived a race known across the galaxy as the Deathworlders. They were feared, almost legendary, among every intelligent civilization that had encountered them. Stories of their power, ruthlessness, and advanced technology circulated through trading hubs and space stations. They were not a peaceful people. Their nature was aggressive, and they rarely hesitated to use force to achieve their goals. Their fleet was vast, with ships designed for both speed and destruction. Even the most powerful empires avoided confrontations with them unless absolutely necessary. To the Deathworlders, survival was about dominance, and they measured strength through the control of territory, resources, and fear. Back on the colony, the settlers were blissfully unaware of how their small distress signal could reach such a fearsome force. Life went on as usual. People worked in their gardens, repaired their shelters, and explored the surrounding land. The children ran freely through meadows and forests, chasing small animals or playing hide-and-seek among the rocks. The adults watched over them, teaching them the ways of the planet, telling stories of other places they had come from, and sharing the history of humanity. Every meal was an achievement, grown and harvested with care. The settlers celebrated small festivals, marking the passing of seasons or the success of a harvest. Music, laughter, and storytelling were the small joys that kept them connected to each other and reminded them why they had chosen this life. So far from the comforts and conveniences of older, more developed worlds. However, life on this planet was never free from challenges. The environment was unpredictable. One day, the weather could be calm, with clear skies and warm sunlight, and the next, violent storms could sweep through valleys, flooding fields, and destroying buildings. Wildlife posed dangers as well. Some animals were curious, others aggressive, and settlers had to remain cautious when exploring new areas. Resources were limited, and every decision about water, food, or energy mattered. The settlers had to work together, rely on each other, and use their ingenuity to solve problems. This taught them resilience, patience, and the value of unity. Even small achievements felt monumental, and the community had developed a sense of identity tied to survival, resourcefulness, and mutual trust. Then came the day when everything would change. A distant, faint signal, almost unnoticed, reached across the galaxy. This signal was the colony's SOS beacon, activated in response to an event that would soon threaten their very existence. The details of the crisis were unimaginable to anyone back on the colony. It was something that they could not handle alone. The beacon, designed to alert nearby allies or rescue teams, traveled across the vast emptiness of space, cutting through light years in a matter of hours or days, depending on the speed of relays. But in its journey, the signal did not reach kind-hearted neighbors or human allies. Instead, it reached the ears of a force that interpreted distress differently, a race whose nature was defined by power, aggression, and a desire to assert dominance. The Deathworlders had detected the SOS, and unlike humans, they did not see it as a plea for help in the traditional sense. To them, it was a signal that presented opportunity to show their power, to to intervene and to leave an unforgettable mark on this small, fragile world. From the Deathworlders' perspective, responding to an SOS was not about compassion or assistance. It was about demonstrating capability, authority, and efficiency. They saw themselves as the ultimate force in the galaxy, a standard against which all others were measured. When they mobilized their fleet, it was done with precision, speed, and absolute certainty that their methods were the only way to handle any problem. Their ships, enormous and heavily armed, could travel vast distances quickly. The colonies and settlements that had survived before often did so by adapting, hiding, or hoping to avoid detection. But the small human colony on this remote planet had unknowingly summoned a power far beyond its comprehension. Back on the planet, life continued as usual. Farmers tended to crops, children played, and families shared meals. There was no immediate sign of the cosmic drama unfolding far above their heads. The settlers did not know that the faint signal their SOS beacon had sent out had crossed light years to reach an alien civilization that regarded humans as fragile, almost insignificant. They could not have imagined that in a matter of hours, their world would encounter a force capable of changing everything. Their lives, routine and predictable until now, were about to intersect with one of the most feared fleets in the galaxy. This moment marked the beginning of a story that would test courage, challenge survival skills, and ultimately redefine the colony's understanding of the universe. Even in these peaceful moments, the story had underlying tension. The settlers had learned to deal with hardships, but nothing in their experience could prepare them for the arrival of a fleet whose power and methods were beyond human comprehension. There was a quiet beauty to their daily lives, but there was also a fragile balance, a sense that the planet, while seemingly calm, could turn dangerous at any moment. The SOS signal was a lifeline, a hope for salvation, but it carried unknown consequences. The colony's story was now entering a stage where ordinary life and extraordinary events would collide. This phase of life, the calm before the storm, was crucial. It established the community's background, their values, and the world they had built, which would make the coming challenges all the more impactful. The people of the colony were ordinary in many ways, yet extraordinary in their resilience. They had survived harsh conditions, built a functioning society from scratch, and created bonds of trust and cooperation. Their knowledge of the planet and its dangers was practical and intuitive, passed down from one settler to another. They understood weather patterns, soil conditions, and animal behaviors. They knew how to repair shelters with limited resources and how to ration water and food. They could navigate through forests and mountains that would have confounded newcomers. These skills, while impressive on a human scale, were minuscule in comparison to the cosmic forces now heading toward them. This contrast between human ingenuity and alien might would soon become one of the most striking aspects of the story. At the very core, this part of the story is about beginnings. It is about the ordinary lives of people who have chosen to settle on a harsh planet, creating a home out of nothing, and unknowingly sending a signal that would attract one of the most terrifying forces in the galaxy. The background provides context for the struggles, achievements, and daily life of the settlers, setting the stage for the events to come. It also introduces the Deathworlders indirectly, hinting at the vast and dangerous universe beyond the colony. Their reputation as a fearsome, unstoppable fleet adds suspense, even before they arrive, because the readers understand that the settlers' world, though thriving in its own small way, is about to face a force they are entirely unprepared for. By the end of this phase, readers are fully immersed in the colony's environment, the landscape, the challenges, the daily routines, and the close relationships among the settlers. They understand both the beauty and the fragility of life on this planet. They also sense the looming danger as the SOS signal travels across space, reaching those whose help is as destructive as it is efficient. The story has established the background, the stakes, and the contrast between ordinary human lives and extraordinary cosmic forces. This is the foundation upon which the rising challenges, escalation, and eventual resolution will be built. The stage is set. The small human colony continues its daily life, unaware of the eyes watching them across the galaxy. They are peaceful, resourceful, and hopeful. But their hope will soon meet the reality of power and destruction on a scale they cannot yet imagine. This introduction is not just a setup, it is a full portrait of life, resilience, and fragility, elements that will make the coming story of SOS signals, alien fleets, and survival compelling, engaging, and deeply human. Life on the colony had always been a mixture of routine and careful planning, but it was about to change in ways no one could have imagined. For years, the settlers had grown accustomed to the planet's challenges, the harsh winds that swept across the plains, the occasional violent storms, and the unpredictable behavior of wildlife. They had learned to adapt, finding ways to grow food in small hydroponic farms, build sturdy shelters from local materials, and maintain a sense of community despite isolation. Every challenge they had faced so far had been manageable, and they had always found solutions together. But the problem that was about to strike was different. It was larger than anything they had dealt with, unpredictable in its scale, and would test the limits of their courage and resourcefulness. That it began with subtle signs that something was wrong. At first, the weather seemed normal, but small anomalies hinted that disaster was approaching. The rivers swelled slightly faster than usual, the wind carried an unusual chill, and the skies, though clear in the morning, darkened in strange patterns by afternoon. The settlers, used to reading these signs, began preparing for what they initially thought would be another heavy storm. People reinforced their shelters, secured supplies, and made sure the children were safe. It was a routine precaution, part of the daily life on a planet where nature could be harsh. But this time the signs pointed to something far more severe. Suddenly, the colony faced a crisis unlike any before. A massive asteroid, torn from the asteroid belt near the planet, was on a collision course. It had been detected late, and the settlers had very little time to react. The impact would be catastrophic if it struck populated areas, threatening homes, food supplies, and even lives. Panic began to ripple through the community as the reality of the threat sank in. Everyone had been taught basic survival skills, but no one had ever faced a disaster of this magnitude. Families huddled together, children clung to their parents, and leaders of the colony rushed to organize evacuation plans and emergency measures. It was a moment of fear, confusion, and determination all at once. The settlers quickly realized that they were not equipped to handle the full impact of the asteroid on their own. While they had built shelters and had access to some emergency equipment, the sheer scale of the disaster was beyond their control. Some tried to calculate the impact zones, moving resources and people to safer areas, while others focused on protecting critical infrastructure such as power generators, water supplies, and food reserves. There was no time for hesitation. Every second mattered. The adults worked frantically, coordinating efforts and trying to reassure children who were scared and confused. Smoke, dust, and noise began to fill the air as minor debris from the asteroid began striking the outer regions of the colony. The world that had once seemed manageable now felt overwhelming and dangerous. In the midst of this chaos, the colony activated its SOS beacon. It was a small device, simple in design, yet capable of sending a powerful distress signal across the galaxy. The settlers knew it was their only hope. They had never expected to use it for a real emergency, but now it became their lifeline. When activated, the beacon sent a coded signal into space, alerting any nearby allies or rescue forces to the colony's plight. The people hoped that someone, anyone, would respond quickly enough to prevent the disaster from claiming lives. As they waited, time seemed to slow, and every second of delay felt unbearable. They could only hope that help would arrive before the worst happened. Unknown to the settlers, the SOS signal did not reach their intended allies. In the vastness of space, the signal traveled far beyond nearby colonies and human settlements. It was detected by the Deathworlders, a race of aliens whose reputation preceded them. To the Deathworlders, an SOS signal was not a simple call for help. It was a notification of an event that required immediate and forceful action. Their fleet, designed for rapid response and overwhelming power, began mobilizing. Unlike human rescue teams, the Deathworlders did not prioritize subtlety or diplomacy. They responded with decisive force. Their ships, massive and technologically advanced, were capable of destroying asteroids, subduing threats, and demonstrating absolute control over any situation. Back on the colony, the settlers continued to struggle with the immediate danger. They watched as the asteroid fragments drew closer, and their preparations were put to the ultimate test. Some worked to reinforce shelters, moving heavy materials and digging temporary barriers. Others focused on evacuating vulnerable populations, ensuring that children, the elderly, and the sick were moved to safer zones. Smoke from fires caused by initial debris began to fill the air, and the tension was palpable. People shouted instructions, coordinated teams, and offered comfort to terrified neighbors. It was a race against time, a chaotic scene of human determination, fear, and ingenuity. Meanwhile, the Deathworlders' fleet moved with alarming speed. Hundreds of kilometers away, enormous ships began forming into battle formations, each vessel bristling with powerful weapons. They calculated trajectories with precision, prepared to neutralize any threat posed by the asteroid. From the perspective of the colony, this was still invisible, but in space, their SOS had already triggered an unprecedented response. The aliens interpreted the signal through their own logic. Danger existed. Intervention was required, and only their brand of overwhelming force could solve the problem efficiently. For them, hesitation or negotiation was irrelevant. Their approach was simple: act decisively and demonstrate dominance. As the Deathworlders approached, the situation on the colony grew more tense. The settlers had to continue managing the immediate crisis of the asteroid, unaware that additional forces were arriving to intervene in ways they could not yet comprehend. Leaders of the colony made crucial decisions, balancing efforts to protect lives, infrastructure, and resources. Families huddled in reinforced shelters, children clinging to parents, while adults worked tirelessly to manage the chaos. Every choice mattered. Move too early, and panic could spread. Delay, and the impact of debris could cause irreparable damage. It was a delicate balance, one that required courage, patience, and quick thinking. Even as the settlers struggled with the crisis, there was a strange, almost ironic twist to their fate. The very signal they sent for help, their plea for survival, was reaching one of the most feared civilizations in the galaxy. The Deathworlders had no empathy in the human sense. Their idea of help was vastly different. They would not come with gentle assistance or careful guidance. Instead, their response would be overwhelming, precise, and destructive in its efficiency. From a human perspective, this was terrifying. From the Deathworlders' perspective, it was simply the correct response to a dangerous situation. The SOS that seemed like a lifeline was about to bring something far beyond what the settlers could imagine, an intervention that was both salvation and a display of terrifying power. The settlers, still unaware of who was responding to their call, focused entirely on survival. Fires were put out where possible, emergency shelters reinforced, and resources carefully rationed. Individuals risked their safety to save others, and the sense of community, which had been the colony's greatest strength, became its lifeline. Every action, every decision, reflected human ingenuity and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. For the first time, the settlers understood the true meaning of their motto: survival was not guaranteed, and it depended on courage, cooperation, and determination. The asteroid was only part of the challenge. The unseen force responding to their SOS would soon overshadow the natural disaster entirely. As hours passed, the colony continued its desperate efforts. The asteroid fragments approached with relentless speed, and the settlers' lives hung in the balance. Despite exhaustion, fear, and uncertainty, people remained determined. They relied on each other for strength, communicating in calm, precise ways despite the chaos around them. Every small success reinforcing a shelter, saving a child from falling debris, securing critical equipment felt monumental. The settlers were living on the edge, experiencing a mix of fear and hope, aware that their actions mattered more than ever before. It was a test of resilience, courage, and the human spirit in a way no one had experienced before. Far above them, in the vastness of space, the Deathworlders' fleet accelerated toward the colony's location. Their ships were massive, sleek, and terrifying in design, capable of maneuvering with incredible speed while carrying weapons that could obliterate mountains, forests, or even entire cities. Their logic was simple: intervene, eliminate the threat, and leave the colony intact but aware of their power. They did not consider human fear, only the efficiency of their response. In a sense, they were bringing salvation wrapped in destruction, an overwhelming show of force that would solve the asteroid problem. While making their presence unforgettable, settlers had no idea that their call for help had reached such a powerful and alien force. All they knew was that disaster was approaching and their survival depended on their own skills, ingenuity, and courage. Every decision mattered. Every action was a potential difference between life and death. And yet, even in the midst of fear, there was a remarkable display of human spirit, people working together, prioritizing the vulnerable, and finding solutions in real time. They had faced many challenges before, but this one would test them more than anything they had imagined. By the end of this phase, the colony was on the brink. Fires, debris, and panic filled the landscape, while above the planet, a fleet was moving at impossible speeds, preparing to intervene. The settlers' SOS had worked. It had reached someone or something, but the response was not what they had expected. They were about to witness a force that would forever change their understanding of the universe. Part 2 ends with tension, fear, and anticipation. The colony struggling with the asteroid disaster, unaware that their SOS has summoned a power far greater than themselves. A power that could save them while reshaping their world in ways they could not yet imagine. The colony had been struggling to survive the asteroid threat, reinforcing shelters, moving people to safety, and trying to manage the chaos as debris rained down from the skies. For hours, they had worked tirelessly, believing that their lives and the lives of their families depended on their ability to stay organized and calm. There was fear in every heart, but there was also determination. The settlers had faced challenges before, but nothing like this. Their world was small, isolated, and fragile, and yet it had survived harsh conditions and unpredictable disasters through sheer human effort and community spirit. They had adapted, learned, and survived. But now, as the SOS signal they had sent into space traveled beyond their understanding, something else was coming, something that would completely overwhelm everything they had known about power, control, and survival. In the vastness of space, the Deathworlders had received the SOS signal. Unlike humans, they did not debate, hesitate, or consider the subtleties of fear, compassion, or negotiation. Their response was instant, calculated, and overwhelmingly forceful. Within hours, their fleet had left its staging area, hundreds of massive ships forming into formations designed for both efficiency and intimidation. Each vessel was a marvel of engineering, bristling with weapons, shields, and sensors capable of detecting threats from light years away. The fleet moved with precision, each ship aware of its role, every action pre-planned and executed flawlessly. To the Deathworlders, the asteroid was a problem, and they solved problems with power. They were approaching the colony not as saviors in the human sense, but as unstoppable forces of intervention, ready to assert control over the situation. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, the settlers were still unaware of the scale of what was coming. They were focused entirely on the asteroid, its fragments, and the immediate dangers to their homes and families. Smoke filled the air, small fires burned in scattered areas, and dust and debris coated the landscape. Children were hidden in reinforced shelters, their frightened eyes peeking through small openings as they listened to the chaos outside. Adults shouted instructions, coordinated evacuation efforts, and worked to secure critical supplies. The colony was a scene of frantic energy, a mixture of fear and hope, as people realized that they might not survive without intervention. Every action mattered. Every decision could save or cost lives. Then, slowly at first, the horizon changed. Tiny glimmers of light appeared in the sky, almost like stars, but moving against the natural patterns of the heavens. The settlers noticed them with curiosity at first, wondering if it was some unusual celestial phenomenon. But then the lights grew larger, and their movement became unmistakable. They were descending toward the planet. Panic returned, this time mixed with awe. The shapes in the sky were enormous, alien, and unlike anything the settlers had ever seen. Ships of unimaginable size cast massive shadows over the terrain, blocking sunlight and sending tremors through the ground. People froze in disbelief, staring at the massive forms above them. The sheer scale of what they were witnessing was overwhelming. It was clear that the colony was no longer facing just a natural disaster. Their world was now in the presence of a power they could barely comprehend. The Deathworlders' fleet arrived with terrifying efficiency. Their ships hovered above the colony, scanning the surface with instruments the settlers could not even begin to understand. Every movement of the fleet was precise, controlled, and intimidating. The settlers were caught in a mixture of fear, awe, and helplessness. Some wanted to run, others wanted to hide, but there was nowhere safe to go that could escape the gaze and power of the fleet. The Deathworlders' approach was both a solution and a display, a demonstration that in their presence, nothing was left to chance. The asteroid, which had been the colonists' primary concern, was now secondary to the overwhelming reality of alien power that had descended upon them. And then the first action occurred. Without hesitation, the Deathworlders fired, not at the colony, but at the asteroid fragments hurtling toward it. Beams of energy, precise and powerful, struck the rocks with incredible speed. Some fragments were vaporized instantly, others were redirected away from populated areas. The settlers watched in awe as the massive celestial threats were neutralized in seconds, an event that would have taken their most skilled engineers and scientists weeks, if not months, to achieve if it had been possible at all. The power of the fleet was undeniable. Their intervention was brutal in its efficiency, and while it solved the immediate danger, it left a lasting impression on the colonists. Survival was no longer about human skill alone. It was about forces far beyond their comprehension. But the intervention was not gentle. While the asteroid threat was removed, the process was not without collateral damage. Shockwaves from the fleet's weapons struck the planet's surface, toppling trees, cracking rocks, and sending dust and debris into the air. Small fires erupted where energy beams hit structures or the landscape, and some shelters were damaged in the process. The settlers, already exhausted and terrified, had to scramble again to protect what remained. Their sense of relief at the asteroid being neutralized was mixed with fear and confusion. The Deathworlders had saved them, but they had done so in a way that was raw, powerful, and almost violent. For the first time, the colonists began to grasp the dual nature of the fleet. Their help was real, but it came at a price measured in destruction and fear. During this critical moment, leaders of the colony faced difficult decisions. They had to manage chaos, tending to those injured by falling debris or small fires caused during the intervention, while also ensuring that their people did not panic at the sight of the enormous alien fleet. Communication became a challenge. Many were in shock, unable to process what had just happened. Children cried, families huddled together, and workers moved desperately to repair damages. The colony had survived a natural disaster, only to face a new, incomprehensible reality. They were now under the gaze of a civilization that measured intervention through overwhelming force. Every moment was tense, filled with fear, hope, and confusion. For the settlers, this was a time of revelation. They realized that the universe was not what they had imagined it to be. Life on their planet had seemed isolated, small, and relatively safe within its own context. They had believed that survival depended on their skills, community, and ability to adapt. But now they understood that the galaxy was filled with powers that did not operate under the same rules. The Deathworlders were a civilization whose actions were beyond morality or ethics in human terms. Their help was efficient, powerful, and terrifying. The settlers began to comprehend that their own understanding of danger, safety, and survival was limited, and that forces far larger than themselves could intervene in unpredictable ways. Amid this chaos, moments of human courage and resilience continued to emerge. Settlers moved through debris to help those trapped or injured. Some ran into dangerous areas to rescue children or salvage supplies, ignoring their own fear in the process. Leaders worked tirelessly to calm panic, give instructions, and make sense of the unprecedented events. It was a mixture of fear, and determination that defined this critical moment. The asteroid had been neutralized, but the colony was now facing the reality of surviving under the presence of a force that was as alien as it was terrifying. Every action mattered, and every decision had consequences that could ripple through the community for years to come. The Death, from their perspective, completed their mission with absolute precision. They had eliminated the immediate threat, ensured the colony was technically safe, and demonstrated their power in a way that would leave an enduring impression. To them, the operation was routine, logical, and efficient. To the humans below, it was a display of overwhelming dominance that left them in awe, terrified, and uncertain about the future. The critical moment of escalation was complete. The asteroid was gone. The immediate danger had passed, but the true nature of the alien force had been revealed. The settlers were alive, but they now understood the scale of what existed beyond their world and how small and vulnerable they were in comparison. In the aftermath of this moment, emotions ran high. Relief mixed with fear, gratitude mixed with confusion. People realized that they had been saved, but in a way that was beyond their comprehension. Families clung to each other, children were comforted by parents, and leaders tried to make sense of what had occurred. The landscape was scarred, fires still smoldered, and dust hung in the air, but the asteroid threat had been removed. It was a moment of survival, but also a moment of revelation, a turning point in the colony's understanding of the galaxy. The settlers now knew that life was not only about facing local challenges but also about encountering forces beyond imagination, capable of saving or terrifying them in equal measure. This critical moment also planted the seeds of a new reality. The colony would have to adjust its understanding of survival, danger, and the universe. They had witnessed power that was absolute, a civilization that acted without human emotion, yet achieved results with unmatched efficiency. Their SOS signal had worked, but it had attracted a response far beyond what they had hoped for or even feared. They now knew that calls for help in the galaxy could reach forces whose methods were terrifying, whose intentions were logical but alien, and whose presence could save lives while leaving lasting impressions of awe and fear. The Deathworlders had arrived, acted decisively, and left an unforgettable mark on the colony. The settlers were safe, but their understanding of the universe, of power, and of survival had been reshaped forever. The critical moment had passed, but the consequences were only beginning. The colony had faced the ultimate test of survival. Courage and resilience and had emerged alive, forever changed by forces beyond comprehension. After the terrifying display of power by the Deathworlders' fleet, the colony found itself in a strange and uneasy state. The asteroid that had threatened to destroy everything had been obliterated in moments, but the aftermath of the intervention left the planet scarred. Trees had been flattened, some buildings were damaged, and patches of land were scorched from the energy beams used to eliminate the asteroid fragments. The settlers, though alive, were exhausted, shaken, and unsure of what to do next. Their hearts still raced from the experience. They were grateful to have survived, yet the presence of the Deathworlders hovering above them or retreating after their decisive action was a constant reminder of the immense and alien power that had just intervened in their lives. This moment marked the beginning of the resolution phase, a time of rebuilding, reflection, and understanding the strange logic of their rescuers. Immediately after the asteroid was destroyed, the settlers had to regroup. Families emerged from shelters, cautiously stepping into the open to check the damage. Children clung to their parents, still trembling from fear, while adults began surveying the destruction. Some looked for water, food, and medicine, realizing that supplies had been scattered or damaged during the chaos. Others focused on rebuilding homes and shelters, using the limited resources they had salvaged. Despite the shock and exhaustion, there was a remarkable display of human resilience. Settlers worked together, supporting one another, sharing food and shelter, and helping those who had been injured. It was a time when the bonds within the community became stronger, forged in the fire of shared crisis and survival. The sheer scale of what had just occurred made everyone pause. No one could deny the overwhelming power of the Deathworlders. Their fleet had arrived, neutralized a massive threat in seconds, and then retreated without waiting for thanks or permission. It was not like human rescue forces, which might approach cautiously, communicate, or negotiate. The Deathworlders acted with their own logic, efficient, ruthless, and without hesitation. For the settlers, it was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. They had survived, yes, but in a way that left them humbled, almost powerless in the face of such alien strength. Adults who had thought they were prepared for disaster now understood that they had only been facing small-scale challenges compared to the cosmic forces that existed in the galaxy in the days that followed. The colony worked tirelessly to recover. The first priority was ensuring the safety of the people. Injuries were treated as best as possible, using medical supplies that had been salvaged or improvised. Children were comforted, and the psychological impact of the event began to be addressed. Settlers realized that fear and trauma were as real as physical damage. Witnessing a fleet of incomprehensible size and power, seeing an asteroid destroyed in a flash of energy, and feeling the tremors of alien weapons left deep impressions. Parents and leaders took time to talk with each other, explaining as best they could what had happened, reassuring the young and scared. and trying to instill a sense of security in a situation that still felt fragile. Once immediate safety was ensured, attention turned to rebuilding. Homes, shelters, and farms had been damaged in the process of the asteroid's destruction. The settlers salvaged materials wherever possible, repairing walls, roofs, and basic structures. They cleared debris in smoldering patches of land, working together to restore their environment. While their tools were simple and their technology limited, the human spirit of perseverance shone brightly. They improvised solutions, built temporary shelters, and shared labor in a way that reflected the strength of their community. Even amid exhaustion, there was hope. The knowledge that they had survived the asteroid and the Deathworlders' intervention gave them a renewed determination to continue living and rebuilding as the initial chaos settled. Leaders of the colony began to reflect on the meaning of what had happened. They realized that the SOS signal, which they had activated in desperation, had brought a response far beyond anything they could imagine. The Deathworlders had saved them, but in their own way, a way that was not human. The fleet did not wait for permission, did not seek to comfort or explain. They acted with precision and power. It was clear that the colonists had been fortunate to survive such an encounter. Leaders discussed the implications of this reality in the galaxy. Survival could involve forces beyond their understanding, and calls for help could summon aid that was terrifying in its magnitude. This understanding marked a turning point in the colony's perception of the universe, expanding their sense of danger, power, and responsibility. The settlers also began to develop new strategies for survival. Realizing that they could not rely solely on their own skills or luck, they strengthened communication systems, repaired and upgraded the SOS beacon, and implemented better warning mechanisms for future threats. Plans were made to fortify shelters, stockpile essential resources, and train people in emergency responses. The colony had learned that survival was not only about facing local problems like storms or minor accidents. It was about understanding the universe at large, about recognizing that there were powers far stronger than themselves that could intervene in ways both helpful and frightening. This period of rebuilding was not just physical but also strategic, preparing the colony for the possibility of future encounters with forces beyond their comprehension. At the same time, there was a deep sense of reflection. The settlers began to share stories of the event, describing the asteroid, the chaos, and the arrival of the Deathworlders' fleet. Their descriptions carried awe and fear, mixed with gratitude for having survived. Children listened wide-eyed, trying to imagine the enormous ships, the flashes of energy, and the alien presence. Adults recounted moments of courage, describing how families and neighbors had supported one another, how small acts of bravery had saved lives. These stories became a foundation for the colony's culture, a way of preserving memory and teaching lessons about survival, resilience, and the unpredictability of the universe. It was a moment when human experience and cosmic reality collided, leaving an indelible mark on the community. Interestingly, the settlers also began to grapple with moral and philosophical questions. The Deathworlders' intervention had saved them, but it had also been terrifyingly destructive. Was the cost of survival always this high? Could they ever fully understand the logic of a civilization so different from their own? Could they trust that future interventions would be beneficial, or would they face consequences beyond their imagination? These questions lingered in conversations, quietly shaping the way the colony thought about the galaxy, about power, and about their place in the universe. It was a humbling realization. Survival was not guaranteed, even when help arrived, and understanding the nature of aid in a vast and powerful universe required wisdom, humility, and vigilance. During this time, bonds within the colony grew even stronger. People realized that they had survived because of their collective effort as well as the intervention of the Death. Individuals who had been hesitant or unsure stepped forward to help. Neighbors who had never interacted closely worked together, and leaders who had doubted their ability to manage the crisis found new confidence in their decisions. There was a renewed sense of unity, a feeling that while the galaxy was vast and potentially dangerous, their small community could face it with courage, preparation, and solidarity. Every story of survival, every act of rebuilding, reinforced the lesson that human cooperation was as vital as any external intervention. Over the following weeks, the colony slowly returned to a new normal. Fields were replanted, homes repaired, and routines gradually resumed. Children went back to playing, though with lingering caution, and adults returned to their tasks, now tempered by a deeper awareness of vulnerability. The SOS beacon was tested, upgraded, and made ready for any future emergencies, and emergency drills became a regular part of life. The settlers had not only survived a massive natural threat but had learned to navigate the presence of a power far beyond human comprehension. They had faced destruction, witnessed awe-inspiring technology, and come through the experience alive. This period of resolution was about accepting the reality of the galaxy, while rebuilding the foundations of daily life. Perhaps most importantly, the resolution phase was about learning. The settlers gained knowledge about themselves, about their ability to endure fear and chaos, and about the broader universe. They realized that survival required a combination of courage, preparation, and adaptability. as well as the humility to accept help from forces whose motives and methods they might never fully understand. They learned that life could be both fragile and resilient, that danger could arrive from unexpected directions, and that extraordinary power could act in ways that were both frightening and life-saving. This understanding would guide the colony for years to come, shaping culture, planning, and their approach to the unknown. By the end of this phase, the colony had survived and begun to recover, physically, emotionally, and strategically. Homes were rebuilt, injuries treated, and morale slowly restored. The settlers had endured one of the most dramatic and terrifying events imaginable, learning lessons about survival, cooperation, and the universe at large. The Deathworlders' intervention had resolved the immediate threat, but it had also reshaped the colony's understanding of reality. Life continued, but it was now colored by the knowledge of immense alien power and the awareness that survival could involve forces beyond human comprehension. The colony had been saved, but the experience left a lasting mark, a mixture of gratitude, fear, and awe that would influence generations to come. After the immediate crisis was over and the colony had begun to rebuild, life slowly returned to a new rhythm, but nothing was quite the same. The settlers had survived the asteroid, witnessed the awe-inspiring arrival of the Deathworlders, and experienced firsthand the terrifying yet life-saving power of an alien civilization. The events had left deep marks, physical, emotional, and psychological, that would influence the colony for years, shaping not only how people lived but also how they thought about themselves and the universe. It was a time of reflection, learning, and adaptation, as the settlers tried to make sense of everything they had endured. In the days immediately following the incident, the settlers took stock of their losses and gains. The damage to homes, farms, and basic infrastructure was significant, but the majority of people had survived. They began clearing debris, repairing structures, and restoring their daily routines. The scars on the land were visible reminders of the power that had intervened, but they also symbolized survival. People worked tirelessly, motivated not just by necessity, but by a sense of gratitude and awe for the forces that had saved them. Children were slowly allowed to play outside again, exploring cautiously as adults rebuilt the world around them. Even amid the destruction, there was hope, resilience, and determination, the hallmark of human spirit that had carried them through this unimaginable challenge. Yet the physical rebuilding was only part of the aftermath. The emotional and psychological impact ran deep. Witnessing the Deathworlders' fleet was an experience no one could forget. Their immense ships, the precise and overwhelming use of energy to destroy the asteroid, and the sheer scale of their power had instilled a mix of fear, respect, and fascination. Settlers found themselves reflecting on what it meant to live in a galaxy where civilizations could intervene with such unmatched force. Parents had difficult conversations with their children, trying to explain what had happened without causing panic, while adults debated among themselves how to prepare for possible future encounters. The event had changed their understanding of safety, power, and the universe itself. They had survived, yes, but they had also been confronted with the limits of human control and comprehension. Over time, stories of the event began to circulate within the colony. People shared their personal experiences, recounting moments of terror, bravery, and survival. Some told of running through falling debris to save family members, while others described the awe of seeing the Deathworlders' fleet obliterate the asteroid in seconds. These stories were not just tales of survival, they became lessons, a way to teach new settlers and younger generations about courage, preparation, and the reality of the galaxy. The narratives carried both warning and wonder. Warning about the dangers that existed in the universe and wonder at the extraordinary forces that could intervene. Oral history became an essential tool for the colony, preserving memories that could guide future decisions and shape the collective consciousness. The settlers also began to rethink their approach to security and survival. They realized that while their own skills, planning, and cooperation had been crucial, they had also been fortunate to receive assistance from an alien civilization. The SOS beacon, which had seemed like a simple lifeline, had reached one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. Leaders of the colony initiated discussions on how to improve defenses, enhance communication systems, and prepare for emergencies more effectively. Training programs were established, emergency drills became routine, and shelters were fortified. Every decision was now influenced by the memory of that day, the reminder that survival in the universe required both human effort and awareness of forces beyond their control. As reflection deepened, settlers began to explore the philosophical and moral implications of what had happened. The Deathworlders had saved them, but not in a way that aligned with human ideas of compassion or gentleness. Their methods were precise, overwhelming, and alien. The settlers debated what it meant to be helped by a civilization that did not share their values. Was the intervention purely beneficial? Could they trust that such a force would act in their favor again? Could they ever fully understand the logic of such a civilization? These questions lingered, shaping the colony's approach to decision-making, diplomacy, and future exploration. The event had expanded their understanding of morality, power, and the diversity of thought that existed across the galaxy. The encounter also inspired a deeper sense of humility. The settlers realized that, despite all their knowledge, skills, and achievements, they were small in the grand scale of the universe. Their planet, which had once felt like the center of their own world, was just a tiny speck in a galaxy filled with powerful civilizations. The Deathworlders' presence had demonstrated that survival often depended not only on human ingenuity but also on the actions of forces beyond their control. This humility became a part of the colony's culture, a recognition that strength came not only from mastery over the environment but also from awareness, caution, and respect for the unknown. At the same time, the settlers found reasons for gratitude and hope. They had survived a disaster that could have destroyed their community entirely, and the intervention of the Deathworlders, though overwhelming, had ensured that the colony could continue to exist. People began to see the galaxy as a place of both danger and opportunity, realizing that survival was possible even in extreme circumstances. There was a renewed sense of purpose and understanding that life was precious, fragile, and worth protecting, and that cooperation, planning, and courage could carry them through challenges that seemed insurmountable. The memory of the fleet and its power became a symbol, a reminder that the universe was larger and more complex than they had imagined, but also that survival and progress were achievable. Education and preparation became central to the colony's evolution. Children were taught not only survival skills but also the history of the asteroid, the SOS signal, and the Deathworlders' intervention. Adults trained to improve emergency response, build better shelters, and communicate more effectively in crises. Knowledge about space, technology, and the wider galaxy became a priority. Even though their immediate resources were limited, the events of the disaster had instilled a sense of urgency. Preparation could mean the difference between life and death. The settlers had survived once, but they knew that future challenges might not come in the form of asteroids. They could be environmental, technological, or even encounters with other alien civilizations. The reflection phase also encouraged introspection at a personal level. Individuals thought about their own reactions during the crisis, their fears, their courage, and the choices they had made. Many discovered hidden strengths, realizing that they could act decisively under pressure, take risks to protect others, and adapt to rapidly changing circumstances. Others confronted their limitations, acknowledging areas where they could improve, learn, and grow. These personal insights contributed to the overall growth of the colony, fostering a community that was both resilient and self-aware. Each person's experience became part of the collective wisdom, helping to guide future decisions and ensuring that lessons were not forgotten. Community bonds, forged in fear and strengthened by survival, became central to the aftermath. The settlers had relied on each other during the asteroid, and this reliance continued as they rebuilt. Cooperation, trust, and mutual support were emphasized more than ever. Leaders were no longer seen as mere administrators but as guides and protectors, helping the colony navigate both daily life and extraordinary events. Relationships deepened, empathy increased, and the culture of shared responsibility became a defining feature of the colony. The experience had taught them that survival depended as much on human connection as on technology or skill. In addition to immediate recovery and preparation, the settlers began to consider long-term strategies for interacting with other civilizations. The Deathworlders had responded to the SOS with force, but they had also demonstrated efficiency, intelligence, and power. The colony realized that the universe was full of civilizations with different values, priorities, and methods of intervention. Learning to recognize, anticipate, and, when necessary, cooperate with these powers became part of their long-term survival strategy. The encounter had expanded their vision, encouraging both caution and curiosity about the wider galaxy. Over time, a sense of wonder gradually replaced some of the initial fear. The Deathworlders' fleet had been terrifying, yes, but it had also revealed something extraordinary about the universe. The settlers saw that survival could come through intervention, even if it was alien, harsh, or overwhelming. They marveled at the precision, power, and efficiency of a civilization so different from their own. While caution and respect remained, there was also inspiration and understanding that the universe was vast, mysterious, and capable of both danger and protection. This perspective became part of the colony's identity, shaping not just how they lived but how they thought about their place in the cosmos. By the end of this period of aftermath and reflection, the colony had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected. They had survived a near-apocalyptic event, witnessed forces beyond comprehension, and learned critical lessons about resilience, community, and the nature of power. The SOS signal had worked, but it had brought a response that was both frightening and enlightening. The settlers had faced death, fear, and uncertainty, and they had come through with newfound understanding and courage. Life continued, but it carried a deeper awareness and knowledge that the universe was vast, that help could arrive in unexpected forms, and that survival depended on preparation, cooperation, and the wisdom to navigate forces far beyond themselves. The memory of the Deathworlders' fleet and the asteroid crisis became a defining story for the colony. It was told and retold, passed down through generations, shaping culture, education, and values. It served as both a warning and an inspiration, a reminder that the universe was full of challenges, but also opportunities. Every member of the colony carried the experience within them, lessons about courage, unity, humility, and resilience. The aftermath and reflection phase solidified the colony's understanding of the galaxy, their place within it, and the importance of being prepared for whatever might come next. In the end, the colony had survived not just a natural disaster but an encounter with unimaginable power. They had rebuilt, reflected, and learned. Their world was forever changed, their lives forever marked, and their understanding of survival and the universe forever deepened. The SOS signal, once a simple call for help, had transformed into a profound lesson. Life was precious, survival required courage and cooperation, and the universe was both vast and unpredictable. The settlers had emerged alive, stronger, and wiser, ready to face whatever challenges the galaxy might throw at them next.